This whole discussion is under the assumption that you guys have listened to us a little bit before and understand that we take your personal credit very seriously, and we're not going to recommend things that we believe to be reckless for your credit or will even hurt your credit at all in the long run.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Eric, here with AJ. And today we are going to be talking about how to keep track of all your credit cards. I've got about 35 of them sitting in a drawer somewhere, and there's a little bit of work that goes into getting everything set up. But once you've got a good system, it is really possible to leverage a whole bunch of accounts, protect your credit, and just maximize the value of the points you're earning. So we're going to talk about some of that stuff in the show today.
Yeah, we've broken it down into a few key points. So we're going to talk about keeping track of your points. We're going to talk about keeping track of your personal finances. That's obviously paramount in all this. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about keeping tabs on annual fees because those can add up if you don't manage them or take care of them. We're going to talk about managing the physical cards, the actual credit cards you own, or how you're going to store the numbers if you're traveling or abroad or don't want to carry all these cards with you. And then finally, you're going to keep track of which cards are churnable, which means cards that you can get the bonus more than once.
You don't think it's a good idea to bring all 35 to Brazil?
No, I don't know, man. Actually, I was a coward. I was such a jackass. I only brought one card and it got stolen. So now I need to have another card sent to me.
Gotta get somebody to put that in the mail for you. That's actually a good tip to just start off with. Is you don't want to have obviously all your credit cards, but you definitely want to have a couple, a couple business and a couple personal, so that if you get in a jam and one doesn't work or somebody steals it out of your pocket at Carnival,
right? Exactly. And another thing too that's kind of inspired me to do is to split checking accounts. And I've got all my cash in one checking account, and I'm not all that keen on how things are going.
So I heard that conversation you had.
Yeah.
It's Bank of America, right?
It's actually Fifth Third Bank. It's a regional one in the Midwest. It's based in Michigan, headquarters in Grand Rapids. But I'm so stupid for not having a couple checking accounts. And number one, if you have an issue accessing cash, and number two, if you get a bank card stolen, if you're in a place like Brazil where it's not likely, but it could happen that you get, some things stolen, then you don't have to worry about getting, I don't know what I would do. I've got you. I could borrow some money from you, but
take money out of my account. Well, it's good. One of the things we've talked about that I think on other shows as well is that like if you have at least two ATM cards, sometimes the ATM will just not work with a specific network of ATMs. So there's like the Plus, there's Exchange, there's a couple of different ones for each of Visa and MasterCard. And so it can be insurance if the ATMs don't happen to like the card you have, but also if something gets stolen. And the really key thing to have is have the transfer set up between the accounts so that if one of those cards disappears, you can have the other card just move all the funds that you need to withdraw as cash into the other account. So
I'm actually going to be back in the U.S. in May, and I'm sure I can do that online too, but it'd probably be much easier than worried about having a bunch of stuff mailed to me here in Brazil. So well, good. Get set up with that Schwab account. They have been completely helpful with everything that's ever come up with issues of ATM. And even if, as you guys probably know, Schwab refunds all ATM fees, and that includes the fees charged by whoever owns the ATM. So not only do they not tack on their own fee, like Bank of America, Andrew was here and he had to pay $5 every time he wanted cash. It would end up being more than $5. That was like just one of the fees.
That was the bank's fee. That was his bank's fee, and then the ATM was charging like 20 reais, which is like $7. It's just like getting taken to the cleaners. Man.
One thing too that is becoming more common, I think, is if you're a member of a local credit union, see if they offer that perk, because there is the Consumers Credit Union out in Illinois, and also when Kunko's down here. One of our friends is a member of a credit union in Austin, Texas, and he actually got, there's no ATM fees. They all got refunded as well when he was down here too. So if you have a local credit union, maybe, I don't know if that's something they're doing to try to attract customers, but it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, in general, credit unions tend to be a lot easier to deal with. They just don't have the huge infrastructure of the big banks, and they probably tend to care a little bit more. You're not so much of a number for them. You're a person that actually influences their bottom line. Whereas, like if you do business with Citibank, they've got millions and millions of customers. They probably don't care about you unless you've got millions and millions of dollars with them. So.
That's a really good point. Well, what do you say we get into some news and updates?
First, before we do that, though, if you guys are looking for links or anything that we mentioned in the show today, you're going to find show notes at abroaders.com/tracking.
Yeah, good. I forgot to even mention the show notes. Getting into the news, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this link going around for the Wanderlust gene. So you guys may have seen it on Elite Daily. In all honesty, I'm not really a big fan of Elite Daily. I think it's a website that typically publishes a bunch of articles for mid-20 affluent people in big cities to lament about how tough it is to be affluent and living in New York with a nice job after graduating from NYU. But the basis of the article is that there's actually some reason to believe that if you have wanderlust or the just desire to just continuously travel, it's genetic. So the gene DRD4, that's involved in dopamine levels. And then there is a variation of that gene, DRD4-7R, which is carried by like 20% of people. And there's been a lot of studies that this actually, people that have this variation of the gene have wanderlust. And it's actually a genetic thing. And there's some further studies that are crazy interesting about the further you are away from Africa, the higher the likelihood is that you will have wanderlust. And there's some people thinking just as far as evolution goes, since we all did come from Africa, the further you are away from Africa, there's still some funky genetic stuff where you're more likely to want to wander. Wow, because you're further away from where you are, or from your actual home, like thousands of years ago.
Huh. All right. Well, definitely know a lot of the people that are listening to this have wanderlust, whether they have the gene or not. And
it's not a requirement. You don't need the gene to enjoy.
You can develop it. That's the thing is, like comfort. It's your comfort zone, right? I mean, being able to travel all the time is a factor of having enough financially to make it possible to get from A to B. Having the freedom of location with whatever you do to earn that money, your job that you can spend some time traveling around, and just making yourself do it. Because even if you got those two things taken care of, a lot of people never go further than a couple of states away from where they live, or a few hundred miles from where they were born.
Plenty of reasons to invent, and plenty of people to reinforce that. Yeah.
All right. So let's get into some discussion about credit cards and getting signed up.
Okay, the next piece is there's actually a list that came out of the 25 busiest airports in the world, and a lot of them aren't a surprise. And airport being busy doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad airport to fly through, but for people that love flying, it is kind of interesting. The big surprises for me is Atlanta is number one. I know it's a massive airport. It's a huge hub for Delta, which is a huge American carrier, but being number one in the world, that's really surprising.
And is this by passenger volume or flights?
Yes, passenger volume. This is actually a year old. The data is like a year old, but they're at 94 million. And then another one surprised me was Bangkok. It's number 17. It's obviously like a pretty big airport, but I mean, they're not the biggest player in Asia by any means. And the one that is super surprising for me is Charlotte, North Carolina is 23. They're obviously a U.S. Airways hub, so if you're flying U.S. Airways, you're going to get routed through there, but it's still...
Yeah, soon to be American. I don't think I've ever actually been at Charlotte.
I've been there, I think, 3 or 4 times.
I do think Denver. Denver also surprised me a little bit. It's number 15 on the list, and I got to say, it's one of the nicest airports. I really like. I think it's called Sky Harbor or something like that. I might be confusing that with Phoenix, actually, but I definitely know that Denver's got some pretty nice facilities. It's a cool airport to spend.
I don't think I've ever flown into Denver. I'll have to do that sometime.
Rocky Mountain High.
Okay. All right, man. Well, let's get into the core content. So first of all, I want to say this whole discussion is under the assumption that you guys have listened to us a little bit before and understand that we take your personal credit very seriously, and we're not going to recommend things that we believe to be reckless for your credit or will even hurt your credit at all in the long run. So...
yeah, we're going to basically, what we're talking about today is how to keep track of dozens of credit cards. And that's where this ends up after, a few years of doing this for points. And, to put some context to this, I started in 2008 earning points mostly with credit card signups. And I probably had a credit score of around 650, maybe 660. and now my score is over 750, and I have 30 plus credit card accounts that are currently open, and probably have opened 35 or more over the course of those 6 or 7 years that I've been doing this.
Yeah, I've got a bunch smaller sample size than you, but I had my credit just wasn't quite there. But in the last year, my credit has improved as well since I've gone after some more airline cards.
Yeah. So. There's a really good resource on the website if you're interested in how credit works. We're going to stay out of that for the most part today and just talk about the management aspect. But if you're interested in understanding your credit and you just are in disbelief about why you could get away with it, it's actually ridiculous. Like the way that the banks evaluate credit is really how good you are at getting credit rather than whether you actually should have it. And so, the fact is it is totally possible to dramatically improve your score while signing up for a lot of cards. But if you're interested in actually understanding how that works and seeing how that might apply to your situation, go to broaders.com and check out the link on the main menu for guides. And we've got a comprehensive guide to understanding your credit score, as well as a guide to negotiating annual fees, which we're going to get into a little bit later in today's show.
Yeah. All right. Well, getting started. So like we said, we're going to talk about keeping track of points, the cards, finances, annual fees, what's churnable, all this stuff. Let's start off with keeping track of your points. The points are...
That's the goal, right?
The goal, to get the points. So what is the tool? I mean, most people already know this, Award Wallet. Award Wallet's a tool, the tool that you use, but what is so crucial about using this tool to manage this in the context of having 20, 30, 35 cards?
Well, so first of all, keep in mind that there's definitely a difference between the number of credit card accounts and the number of frequent flyer programs that you have. And Award Wallet is set up to manage your frequent flyer program. It's actually a really simple tool in terms of the user experience. You just add every program that you have. So an example like American Airlines, US Airways, Delta, United, you just add those programs to Award Wallet, and Award Wallet goes in and logs into those websites and automatically downloads your balance and checks your expiration date. Right. And they actually integrate with 650 loyalty programs. So from their end, it's not a simple thing. Like they are hustling like hell to get all these programs.
Yeah, there's some serious
every time Chase updates their website, they got to fucking fix it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work that goes into it on the Award Wallet side. But from the user experience, you add your program once, and you're going to be able to download all of those balances and see them all in one place, which is a really valuable asset. And also, if you pay for the premium version of that, which I think is only $10 a year, you can get access to your expiration dates. And that's really important. The cardinal sin of collecting points is letting those points expire. And so just having that deadline that says these points are going to expire on X date is super valuable. Now, one caveat to add to the Award Wallet, there are definitely a few programs that don't work completely. And I love Award Wallet's strategy with this. Like they'll get a cease and desist letter. They've basically right now, the two that are really not working are Delta and United. Those are the big ones. And Delta basically sent them a letter like, stop accessing our website. We want people to come to our site. And it's greedy on Delta's part. They want you to have to log into their site so that you see their advertising, that they can talk you into crappy uses of their miles, et cetera, et cetera. And so they said to Award Wallet, you can't do this anymore. And Award Wallet just said, okay, we're going to create an email address for every member that is based on your account, and you just put that email address into Delta's system so that's the number the address they forward your statements to.
Right.
And then Delta's going to forward your statement right to Award Wallet, or is going to display it for you.
Yeah, it's essentially the Award Wallet just outsmarting them.
Yeah.
Now, so Award Wallet is a great tool to keep track of all that. And like you said, pay a couple bucks a year, knowing the expiration dates to protect yourself from letting your miles go stale. But you also do like to keep track of all of your individual program login information as well, to not be solely dependent on Award Wallet, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I mean, hopefully, if you haven't signed up for Award Wallet, you have those logins because you need them to be able to set up the Award Wallet account in the first place. But there's reasons that you're going to actually eventually need to visit certain websites. I mean, in general, the frequent flyer program sites are the places that you can search for availability, and ultimately the places where you can book your tickets using points if you want to avoid a phone call. There's a lot of cases where you can get on United's website and find your ticket, book it, pay for it. All of that's taken care of on the site. So you do need to know your login for the main programs. And what I recommend for that is a program called RoboForm. And you don't have to use RoboForm. There's a couple of them like this, but it's basically a password manager that lets you go in, and when you log into the site, it allows you to save it, and it's a browser plugin for Safari and for Chrome for sure. and you basically just enter your master login one time, and then anytime you're on United's homepage, it's like sitting there with a little message that says, would you like to log in? And it's going to automatically log you into that site, and that's a super valuable tool. But I would also say keep your, if you don't use that, use RoboForm or LastPass or one of those things, keep them in a Google Doc or something like that. It's definitely not as secure to have it in a spreadsheet, but one way or another, you want to have access to those logins.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Moving into other things we're keeping track of. So personal finances, the points are the goal, but it's not worth it if you're missing payments and damaging your credit and just not keeping tabs on all of your cards. So what's the main tool you use for keeping track of all of your cards and your statements and your bills?
Well, so the way that this sort of happened is, I got to the point where I had like 4 credit cards, and it started to get a little bit ridiculous because the traditional way is, you get a statement in the mail every month, and you check the statement and you make sure all your charges are legitimate. That somebody didn't like buy, a whole bunch of crap online and that you didn't want. So you got to check your statements. And when I got past like 4 or 5 credit cards, it started to get a little crazy to try and check all of those.
Sure.
And so there's a program called mint.com. It's a great website, and they have automatic logins to almost all the major banks. And so you basically, in the same way that you add your frequent flyer programs to a Wardwall, you add your credit card accounts to Mint, and it will log in and check your balances and download your transactions and display them in a place that you can see them all at once. And so what I do is I basically go through, I have all 30 credit cards added to Mint, and I go through once a month at least, and I check all of the transactions. And so
so you and I, we disagree on this. Well, not necessarily disagree. We just have different personal philosophies.
Different approaches, yeah.
So you actually go through and you okay every single transaction to make sure that there's not any bogus ones. And I know you've caught some bogus ones. I typically don't do this. I have a little bit more of the eyeball approach. I check my bill and I say, that seems reasonable. Rent was this much. I did go out a little bit this month. That seems about right. Now, if something does, grab my attention, I'll take a look and I'll comb through. But typically, I don't look through every single transaction.
Yeah, I mean, I made a point. It was a habit that I made, and it was basically a deal that I made with myself that if I were going to go after all these credit cards, I was going to make a point to make sure that I had a system in place to check all those transactions. And the other thing is you don't have nearly as many cards at this point as I do. And so, if you're just dealing with a couple of different credit card accounts, you maybe use a different system or don't have to be quite as rigorous. The other thing I would say is that I haven't been 100% good at doing this when I'm in the United States because I tend to know what my transactions are at home in the U.S. I can recognize the merchants. I know that, Lowe's or Home Depot or the grocery store, those are the things I can see. When you're in Brazil, all the names are in Portuguese, so like I actually check things probably almost once a week when I'm here just because I have to remember like, I bought something at a random restaurant that was 30 reais, that should be about $10, figure out what it is. So I do a lot better job of checking it there. And one thing, the bottom line, the reason that it's so important to check these things is that you have the right to dispute any charge that isn't yours. And that's part of a fraud protection. It's part of the Consumer Protection Act that governs the way banks are allowed to issue terms and conditions for credit card accounts. And so this is a critical thing to know if you're going to get into these relationships with the banks, is that you have a right to dispute any charge that isn't legitimate. And also, it actually stems a bit beyond that.
Okay, well, I guess we should talk about this is in the context of credit cards. For people out there that maybe use a debit card, you can dispute that, but it's a lot completely different.
It's a very, very different process. So the protections are definitely stronger for cards. And what I was going to say is it's not just whether you made the purchase or not. Obviously outright fraud, they're going to protect you from that and you're not liable for those charges. But a lot of times, you buy something and it turns out to be not what you paid for or not what you thought you were getting. Right. This happens a lot with online services where somebody is selling you a dream and it's not exactly what you thought you were getting. And you can dispute that. You can say, I asked for somebody to edit my podcast, or I asked for somebody to take step X, Y, and Z, and they didn't do it. And if you call the bank and say that, they're going to give you a credit for the charge. And basically the way it works is the bank usually takes about 30 days to investigate, and they typically will give you a provisional credit which becomes permanent after they finish their investigation. And you have about 90 days from the time that the charge posts. So you don't have to do this review every month, but if you do check your transactions and you see something 2 months ago that was just not a transaction,
you'll get your money back faster.
You're going to get your money back by calling the bank. And definitely take a look at that and know your rights with respect to merchants.
Yeah, one thing I think we should also touch on to simplify things is, unless you're in the middle of a churn and you're in the bonus challenge and you're putting spend on different cards to hit minimum spends, you really shouldn't be using many credit cards, just for the sake of simplification. So you should know that if you want to go through Mint and check on the balances, you should see zeros for pretty much everything. You should have your daily driver, the credit card that's earning the right type of points for you, and that should be the only card that will have any type of statement that's bigger than zero, unless for some reason you're carrying some debt, which obviously you really should avoid if you're going to be doing this. But use that one card that earns the miles that you need the most, for the time being.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think, that's part of the reason my monthly review is so simple, is that I'm actually just checking transactions on the Chase Sapphire card right now, because I'm using that. It's got no foreign transaction fees. So I check all those. But my 29 other cards, they don't have transactions. And if they do, there's a problem.
Right.
Maybe outside of a few recurring things where I've got like Netflix on a card that I had a long time ago. Anyways, the last thing that I wanted to point out as far as managing credit cards is you want to set up auto pay for every single card that you get. And this is one of the first steps. Like when I get the card in the mail, that's the first thing I do is I log into the online banking and I set up auto pay to draft it out of my checking account. And that's because with 30 cards, it's really hard to keep track of the date. And the worst thing that you can do is miss a payment. If you miss a payment, you've got 30 days to fix it before they report it to the credit agency. Right. But that will take you off your horse faster than anything else in this hobby is not making a payment on time. Your credit gets ruined and you're not able to continue doing it. So the auto pay works like this. You basically just set it up to pay the full statement balance. That's what you need to pay every month to avoid paying any interest. And you just have that come out of your checking account. And the only thing that you need to do is make sure you've got enough money in your checking account to cover the balance.
Right.
That way you never have to worry about missing the payment, hurting your credit, and not being able to travel for free.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. One final thing you I see in the notes here too, talking about Mint and annual fees. We're going to talk about annual fees in a minute, but they do have a nice feature there to kind of keep tabs on that as well.
Well, that's part of your review process. So they generally, Mint does a nice job of tagging those, and it'll say you got charged a fee, and you'll even get an email that says that. But in general, you just want to check. Like for me, when I'm not using a card regularly, seeing that annual fee, I actually just saw one for $450 post from the Citi Executive Advantage World Elite MasterCard. Want to punch the guy that came up with the name of that card, but it just posted to my account. And that's something a lot of people ask us about, so I wanted to make sure I explicitly said this. If you see an annual fee post, it's not too late. Right. You don't have to, we're going to talk about some tools, you can set calendar reminders, you can set emails automatically to go out and remind you, but you don't have to catch it before it happens. If they charge you the fee, you've got at least 30 days to call the bank and dispute it or negotiate to get the fee waived or get some extra points. So, just keep checking those transactions, and when you see an annual fee post, do something about it. Call the bank and ask them to waive the fee.
Yep.
The last thing I wanted to mention about annual fees is that if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about how much of a cost that actually creates for you when you have a high volume of credit card accounts, you should check out episode 53 of the podcast. It's the earnings section of a 2-part series on annual review of 2014, where I talk about all the cards that I signed up for, the points that I earned, and then in the second episode, I talk about the redemptions and how much value I got. And so I actually break down my annual fees, how many of them I ended up paying, and what I got in return. Some of those accounts I just kept open because I liked the benefits. Other ones I got bonus points and so forth. So check that out. I think it came out to around $1,200 that I actually paid in annual fees for cards that were worth it. But in exchange for that, I got probably 25 or 30 flights. So it's a big trade-off, and it's worth remembering that you should invest in this a little bit. It's not totally free, but you're as long as you got an
psychological issue for a lot of people. When we talk to people that are maybe interested in the service or they just have a question, there's people that talk about, well, I don't think I should sign up for this credit card because there's a $95 annual fee, and it's like there's some psychological trigger where their fees, it's going to add up, it's not a good deal, the bank's going to win. But no, just do the math. Where do you want to travel? How many points do you need? Oh, well, you could go to Asia with that. Do you think $95 is worth it? Like, come on, just do the math, get out the calculator.
Okay, so let's jump into a little bit more about managing the cards themselves. Obviously, to use a credit card, you got to know what your credit card number is. Mm-hmm. You got to know the expiration date, the little 3-digit code, and also you want to have on file the numbers that you call if you need to talk to your bank.
Sure.
Because that's important if fraud comes up or if you just need to check on some information about your account. So for the most part, I've got my cards, as I said, sitting in a drawer. There's cards that I've actually never seen.
There's a big difference if you're traveling or if you're at home, or if you're at home, if you have, the cards in the drawer, you have access if you need to use them. So it's not quite as important to have them stored online, but for the people that are out and about, yeah. So you got your cards in your little drawer.
Yep. My mom opens my mail. Thank you, Mom. When I'm away in Brazil, and anytime I get a new card, she calls me up and gives me the information, and I enter that into RoboForm. And so, again, there's a lot of services like that. I think LastPass has the same type of thing.
1Password as well?
Yep.
There's out of Williamson, Michigan, I believe.
Really? I didn't know that. Yeah. So there's a few good online services, but I definitely recommend RoboForm. It's pretty cheap and definitely worthwhile. And you can store all that information about the card. So keep the customer service phone number, your card number, all that stuff. The cards that I actually take with me are the ones that confer benefits for having the card with you. So besides the fact that I bring a couple of personal cards and a couple of business cards to actually make purchases abroad, I keep always the American Express Platinum card because I know that's going to get me in the lounges. I keep the Citibank card, which gets me into the American lounges. Right. That's the Executive Advantage one that I need to cancel or get them to waive the annual fee. So that's kind of the general operating procedure here. Now, a couple of other things to keep track of, and this I actually do in a spreadsheet because it's not very easy to keep track of all of these details in RoboForm, although I think you could sort of make a note. But just, you want to keep track of when the annual fee is going to hit, when is your minimum spend due, and that's just for when you first sign up. Mm-hmm. But you got to know that date because it is a horrible thing to miss out on 50,000 points because you weren't paying attention to the deadline.
Right.
I always keep track of whether a card's in mint, so I just have like a yes or no. Almost all of my cards are, but that just makes it a lot easier for me to quickly see where I can find those transactions. And then another checkbox when you've set up auto pay. And if you've got multiple bank accounts, it's important to know which bank account those cards are going to come out of. I would suggest consolidating so that all of your cards come out of one account. Then you just have a single account to keep track of and know that you've got a sufficient balance to pay the bills.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so kind of doing a little bit of a recap of the tools that we've mentioned. Right now, where we're at is RoboForm to store passwords and credit cards. We've got Award Wallet to manage our points and the expiration dates. Google Docs or some type of spreadsheet to store the stuff Eric just mentioned, like minimum spend due, is it in Mint, and all this stuff. Mint to manage your personal finance. So I think we're just 4 tools in right now.
Yeah. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is just sort of a general tip that you should follow when you sign up for new accounts. This actually happened to one of our customers recently, and it had never happened to me, so I wanted to make sure I pointed this out for people that are applying for multiple cards that earn the same type of points. Mm-hmm. So an example of this is like American Express has a couple of different co-branded Delta cards. So you might get the personal card, and you might also get the business card, and each of those have a 50,000 point sign-up bonus, so you're going to get 100,000 points. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the Citi cards that are out right now. We can drop a link into the show notes. That's a great deal. There's a 50,000 point Citibank card for personal and for business. And what happens is when you sign up, the bank is asking for your American Airlines frequent flyer number. And if you don't provide that on the application, it's totally possible that they're going to create a new account. And so what happened to one of our customers is that the bank actually created a separate new account for the other card, and they ended up having 50,000 in one account, 50,000 in another account, and 14,000 that they already had from before. So they ended up having their points split across 3 accounts. And that's a nightmare when you're trying to redeem because you have to have enough points to redeem the whole award. And you want to have all the points left over consolidated so you can build up for that next award. So having them in multiple places is disastrous for trying to use the points. And it's really easy to avoid. That's the good news is you just want to call the bank and double check, confirm that they've got the right frequent flyer account attached to your card.
I actually had to do this with United, maybe a year ago or so with the Mileage Plus card. Mm-hmm. I had an issue there, and I had a really bad feeling about it because I'm trying to think how I applied for it, but just somehow in the back of my head, I'm just like, I just don't want this to get mixed up with another account. I actually called them, and I had them resolve that for me.
Yep.
Or the same thing would happen to me, because I had a few United miles just from some paid flights before, and I wanted to make sure everything was in one account.
Yeah, generally the banks can fix that, and that's why I said, just get out in front of it and try and do something to make sure that they align those accounts and get them all posting into one. And if they've done the wrong thing, it's generally something they can reverse, but you want to do it as quickly as possible.
Okay, so the final thing we're going to talk about is managing the credit cards that are churnable or not churnable. So we're going to keep tabs on which cards you can get the bonus for more than one time. And typically different banks have different rules, or different cards have different rules. So maybe one bank will say every 24 months you can get a bonus. Barclays is a bit more laissez-faire. Some people say, just wait 6 months and you're probably good. There's no real limitations. And then there's also different things, like if one of the credit cards changes, like when wasn't one of the Chase cards went from Visa to MasterCard, so then...
Yeah, basically the banks, they will decide that a card is a new product often when they change the logo from Visa and MasterCard, or when they add some sort of significant benefit or take away a benefit. So if the card changes substantially, a lot of times that actually opens up the door for you to earn a bonus a second time. The core thing for this is that this is something that definitely applies later on, and that's why when we talked about the things that you want to track, one of the important ones is the application date. Because you need to know when you applied for the card to know whether you're in the clear to get the card again. And actually, that's an important point. I don't think we mentioned it before with that spreadsheet, but you may also want to track the date that you received the miles, because Chase, for example, actually sets that time window at 24 months since the last time you got the award. And so, just to give you that example with Chase, their explicit rules are the 24 months since you got the last bonus. And also, you can't have another version of the same card open at the same time. So, for example, my Chase Sapphire Preferred, I could close that account. I'd probably want to give it a couple of weeks just to make sure the account was completely closed and the bill was paid and everything like that. But then if it's been more than 24 months since I got the bonus last, I could apply again and get the points again for that. And so that's something to keep in mind. We're going to link to a couple of places on Flyer Talk where you can find good information about what cards are churnable. Unfortunately, there's not really a great comprehensive resource. It's something that we keep track of for our customers, based on when they applied for cards. And so it's something you want to track on your own, but it's going to pay off big time if you start to run out of cards in a few years. There's definitely at least 4 or 5 cards that I'm now eligible to get the bonus a second time, and luckily I know which cards those are because I recorded the dates when I applied the first time.
Yeah, you just mentioned Chase's rules, and in American Express, for example, it depends on which card you have.
That's true, actually, of a lot of them too. Yeah. I mean, I think Barclays, like you said, they were kind of lackadaisical.
Yeah, I mean, that's not anything that I know for certain. I haven't read all of their terms and conditions. It's just we have experience with people getting the U.S. Airways bonus multiple times, and then I forget which blog it was. It was one of the award travel blogs was talking about how Barclays, compared to everybody else, there didn't seem to be any real system in place to prevent you from getting multiple bonuses, where Amex and Chase and Citi all had fairly explicit rules, whether it be for a particular card product or just in general.
Yep. And so, I mean, the core thing is that generally you're going to find the information about whether you're eligible for the bonus in the terms and conditions, especially with MasterCard. They do a really nice job of laying that out in black and white. So take a look at that. The last thing I wanted to share is that in addition to that Visa MasterCard trick, there's also an opportunity to get multiple business cards. And so if you have more than one business, or even if you just have one business and you want to apply as a sole proprietor for another idea, it's possible to get multiple versions of, for example, the Chase Inc. card. We've got one for our web media company that we started a while ago. We can probably get one for Broaders as well. Yeah. And you and I could each get one individually under our social security number.
Right.
So that adds up. Obviously, you don't want to do that all at once, but over a period of 6 to 12 months, you can accumulate a couple of different accounts. And so that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. So that pretty much wraps it up. Just full circle, like we said, there's only a few tools you really need. And this won't take that much time as far as each year goes, as long as you invest a little bit of time to create a spreadsheet, sign up for the accounts, and get your systems in place. And then you're really not doing anything out of the ordinary. If you don't have 35 cards, you still probably want to make sure you're not getting screwed by people stealing your identity. You're probably not wanting to pay an annual fee, even if you only have 1 or 2 cards. It's pretty much the same thing. We're building systems to allow you to do the management at a bigger scale.
One last thing to mention is that we are still offering a free consultation to anybody that wants to find out how they can get to their next planned destination. We'll talk over the cards that they can use, go over their spending, review their credit, and just give you a really good idea of what you can expect, what kind of potential you have to save on travel. And we're also giving away a copy of the spreadsheet that we use to track our own credit cards and use to track cards for our customers, and that we're building our app based on. So that's something, if you mention it to us on the consultation call, you got to sign up and schedule a call with us. And if you mention that, we'll send along a copy of that Google Doc if you want to use it to track your own card.
If you want a free consultation, you can go to abroaders.com/premium. And there we're just going to ask for some pretty basic information that will give us, enough information about you to know how much we can actually help you when we have that call.
Sounds awesome. All right, so this week's International Jam is a new discovery for me, and it is a Cuban band called Orishas. The track is Mystica. I know you looked into this a little bit. Kind of a cool story.
Really interesting guys. So they're Cuban expats that they signed a record deal in France. So that's kind of where they were based. I believe the band has since broken up, but they had a pretty long run. But the interesting thing for me is I've got a history with baseball. I played a lot of baseball, and you see these Cuban guys who defect from Cuba and they can't come back. They burn the bridge. They go to the U.S. They try to play pro ball. But this is a little bit different of a story. These guys left under different terms, and actually in 1999, Fidel Castro threw a party for them and had a meeting with all the musicians in the group. And it was the first time in the history of Cuba that the national government showed support for hip hop music. So they were huge, just massive for the hip hop movement in Cuba.
Pretty awesome. I definitely have been jamming out to these guys. This is not at all the only good song on their album, so check it out. They're on Spotify, and you can also find them on iTunes. We'll have that linked up in the show notes, which again is at abroaders.com/tracking. We will see you guys next week, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard. Wherever you are, travel safe.
Cheers.
Hey Brothers, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week. Mama, orgullo, mala fama, mira, ama, si tienes gana, si te decides, llama. Tu princesa hermosa de la flor, la rosa, tu preciosa eres la semilla. Tus ojos son la octava maravilla que en este mundo se ha logrado. Tu cuerpo perfecto como Da Vinci ha pintado la Mona Lisa y esto